I'd like to thank X11 Coffee for being today's sponsor.
Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello and welcome to Harvest to Pour. I'm your host, Matthew Shipp, and today I am here with Tom Fuchs, the general manager of Hoffman Wineries in Augusta, Missouri. Tom is also the founder of Headwaters Wines and Spirits, an international consulting firm where he helps small and medium wineries develop management systems and create sales and marketing plans for long-term brand growth. How are you doing today, Tom?
Beautiful day in St. Louis.
All right, absolutely. So let us know a little bit about yourself, kind of give a brief overview of your career in the beverage industry.
It's funny how your paths take the course they do. I worked in restaurants all through my college years. Apted Restaurant Group owned a bunch of high-end restaurants and worked in their kitchens. And after playing college basketball, I traveled around Europe and really got to understand geography, learned about food and wine in Europe. And I came back working for a bank because that's what my education was for. And I had a neighbor who introduced me to the wine business. Said, well, my father works for a company he's headquartered in Boston, but they're nationwide, and was a wholesale operation that represented the finest wines in the world, and all the pieces fit. I ended up, after that, working for large companies, Gallo Wine Company. Coca-Cola was the second largest wine company in the world behind Gallo for many years.
Interesting.
And then I ended up working for an import company that really expanded my interests and knowledge. I wrote a syndicated wine column that was picked up by the Globe Democrat, a former paper in St. Louis, and all roads led to California. I ended up buying a winery and a small group of investors, and buying a winery in Alexander Valley, northern Sonoma. Did that for years, but every step along the way was a confidence in understanding how the system works and having a successful career, which led me to forming Gannon Wines and Spirits, helping wineries around the world, from New Zealand to South Africa, Western Europe, and all over the United States, basically asking the question, how do I get distributors to represent my brands where I feel like I'm being successful? And that's how Headwaters Wines and Spirits, that's the platform of what we do. But it's a full service operation, which people kept asking me, do you know David Hoffman? And the Hoffman organization just bought all these wineries in Augusta. Mm-hmm. And I had written about the Missouri River Wine Road years ago, back when I was doing the syndicated column, focusing on Augusta, Missouri and Hermann, Missouri. And when I ended up talking to David, the conversations just flowed about what his vision was about Augusta, in telling the history of that I call the greatest untold story in the wine industry, going back to the significance in the 1850s and 60s when France had what was a blight caused by a root louse called phylloxera. And phylloxera is basically like a termite that ate all the roots of all the vines throughout France, and in a very slow dying process. And it was an entomologist. Now we're talking in the 1860s. An entomologist at the University of Missouri discovered that the phylloxera root louse does not like eating the vines of the American heritage grapes and won't eat them. And what transpired was over 300,000 rootstocks were shipped to France and saved the French wine industry. And to this day, wineries that I've worked with in Burgundy and in Bordeaux, France, to this day still use the American heritage rootstock. They refer to it as Saint George, or in Italy, San Giorgio, the Dragon Slayer.
The Dragon Slayer. So what is meant by American heritage grapes?
So in the science of grape varieties, the European style grape varieties that we know of as Chardonnay and Cabernet, what we see being grown in California, That is what is called Vitis vinifera. The American heritage grapes are cousins of them. Vitis labrusca is the Latin names for these two varietals. The difference is in just real short terms. Vitis vinifera grape varieties are high in sugar, low in acid, and require temperate climates to grow. Vitis labrusca, the American heritage grapes, they're much hardier, can withstand colder weather in hotter summer weather, colder winter weather. But the grape varieties are high in acid and lower in sugar. Subsequently, the wines historically were fortified with some kind of sweetener, be it sugar, beet sugar, some sort of sweetener additive. But because of the high acidity, they were making wines with a sweeter profile to balance the acid and the sugar in the winemaking.
Interesting. Okay. So
what was developed, what they call is French-American hybrid. And there's an interesting history with that because it started in France with viticulturalists that were wondering how can we create a hybrid that we can grow the grapes and that we know in regions like Normandy and Brittany, which are colder climate areas, and they wanted to be able to grow grapes in those areas that can withstand the winters of those northwest regions of France. Taking it a step further, the Cornell University in New York took it to another step and kept moving it forward with those concepts of creating hybrids that are grape varieties that are a little bit lower in acid than the American heritage and a little bit higher in sugar so they can make table wines. And what evolved were grape varieties known as Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Vidal Blanc. You see the French names, Niol, Chambourcin. Now the one real popular grape variety here is the Norton, which is the official white grape variety of Missouri, which is an American heritage grape variety. So the wineries in Missouri kind of focus on the varietals that I just talked about, along with other American heritage grape varieties that we know of as Concord, Catawba. So that's the long-term history. In the 1890s, all the way through 1918, Missouri was the largest wine producing state in America. People don't realize it. One of the wineries in Hermann, Missouri, Stone Hill, was the second largest winery in the United States during that period. And it wasn't until 1918 did California surpass Missouri in wine production, just 2 years before the creation of Prohibition that ran from 1920 to 1933. And California people found a way to get around it. I won't get into those details.
Interesting.
They tell you, do not put in 2 tablespoons of yeast into this batch of grape juice because it could cause fermentation and turn it into wine.
Oh,
but
geez.
Missouri kind of fell behind the wine production world and kind of went dormant really until the 70s when people started Missouri is saying, gosh, this history going back to the 1850s of the Germans who went up the Missouri River looking at the steep hillsides of the river saying, my God, this reminds me of home. Let's grow grapes. And then in 1980, the American government, what used to be known as the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and then it was the Alcohol Tax and Trade Bureau, the TTB, said, every other wine producing country, Italy has what they call the Denominazione di Origine Controllata, the DOC laws, the AOC laws of France, the OC laws of Spain. We don't have anything like that. So they formed what they described as the AVA laws, American Viticultural Areas, designating these are the wine producing regions of America. And the first assignee as a American Viticultural Area was Augusta, Missouri, and Napa was the second. Yeah, so that kind of history and a tip of the hat to what Augusta, Missouri meant to the American wine industry and the American wine industry's history.
Interesting. So your passion for the wine in this region is clear. Your understanding of it is great. So and also you've been through, you said you were around purchasing wineries, working with wineries. What are you finding that when you come in to help a winery is some of their biggest challenges they run into, or what do you see most frequently?
The wine production here?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one aspect of it, and again, working with wineries throughout the Midwest, be it Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, even upper, like the Finger Lakes area of New York State or Long Island, every area has its own challenges. And some of these areas have found out that in particular sections of their vineyard, they can grow the vinifera style, the California style grape varieties. Others can't. Missouri has not found a niche to have success with vinifera grape varieties. So they've really focused on developing the French American hybrids. It's the consumer there, which is part two of them, that they go, well, I want to support Missouri wines. And then they walk to the department, they look around and they go, I don't see any Chardonnay or Cabernet.
Yes.
And what is going to taste? I like this, I like a Chardonnay. What's comparable to the Chardonnay?
Mm-hmm.
So what we've developed is these case cards and online inscriptions saying on these case cards, if you like Chardonnay, you'll love this American hybrid called Chardonnay. And we just go down the list. Pinot Grigio, you like Sauvignon Blanc. You like Sauvignon Blanc. You like Vitis Blanc. If you like Riesling, you'll love the Vigneault. And then on the red wines, Chambourcin is similar to the Pinot Noir, as is Norton, is a big, rich, full-bodied red, similar to the Cabernet. They're not the same grape varieties. They're not going to taste exactly the same, but they have a similar profile. So that's kind of our focus, is to educate the consumer to say, this is the Missouri's answer to what the type of wine I particularly like.
Yeah, that is a bit of a branding to overcome when people have been drinking and used to the Cabs and the Pinot Noirs. Now you're bringing in something that's not named that, but may have similar, but yet different taste. How do you make that? I mean, would your ultimate branding goal to be for people to identify the grape for what it is and not compare it to a Cab?
One of in fact, this afternoon, I'm meeting with our regional sales manager, calling on a higher end restaurant. And what I'm finding is these restaurateurs in the state of Missouri go, well, I always had difficulty. I don't know Missouri wines very well and getting consumers to pick it up off my menu. So our focus is by the glass programs. So they come in and they go, what wines do you have available by the glass? And then they go, oh, this is from Missouri. I'm not familiar with that grape variety. And as a by the glass program, you say, well, here, have a taste so you know what you're getting. These programs are working very successfully. We're doing on August 1st, we're doing a wine dinner at a restaurant called Yaya's that's been around, 25 years. And they describe themselves as a European bistro. Food is outstanding. Wine dinners, I just absolutely enjoy because, and I've done these all over the country, hundreds of them, is the chef is unshackled from their menu. So, it takes a lot of work to create a menu that you can move hundreds of people through your restaurant in a particular evening, that you have a system that works. But when they do a wine dinner, they're free to create whatever they want to. And these dinners become spectacular evenings of food and wine. And there's always a preliminary tasting and discussion about a wine for the reception, a wine to go with the appetizer, and usually 2 wines to go with the main course, usually red of different personalities, and then a sweet dessert wine to go with the desserts. And as you're tasting the wines, you can see the wheels spinning of these really quality chefs saying, oh my God, how about this with that? Oh, I got an idea. How about this with that? This would go great with wild boar. Is there one in the kitchen right now?
Wow.
So these dinners turn into spectacular events.
So that's a great point with the chefs being that first on the palate for trying something new. That's a great way to introduce different styles of wines and introduce it to the public. I talked to another winery out in Colorado, and they have the similar challenges. They're always being compared to Napa Valley or the more familiar wines. They've pushed towards the younger crowd. They're looking for different tastes, different flavors, different styles of wines, and they are entertaining that through their growth program and coming up with even like bubbly wines and other such things. But they're also promoting the different grape and not even trying not to identify with traditional wine drinkers. So, but that's just another avenue I've heard. But I really like the idea of going through the chefs to introduce this new ideas with the wines to the public this way.
Well, it enables a vintner to tell their personal story as, what's the history of this winery? Like I described the ABA district of Augusta. Each winery has that kind of a story. Kind of in keeping when you were talking about Colorado, I do a lot of wine seminars. And one of the things that, I like to, let's say, the wine regions of France and kind of walk people through a different country, the wine regions of Italy or even Germany, Spain, but also say, we're going to do a Cabernet tasting and it's going to be Cabernet grown in all these different locations. And when you mention Colorado, every region has a different profile because of a terminology that's a wine terminology, terroir. And terroir is that unique combination of temperature, of climatic conditions, and of soil and season, which creates a specific personality. And when I say soil, it's not just the soil, it's the subsoil, because these vines grow for years and all of a sudden they're burrowing down into clay or granite. And these vines then start taking on characteristics of the minerality of the subsoils in these regions, which give it a unique personality. Be it Chablis in the district of Burgundy, it's the subsoils are flint, and so they're always described because of the crisp acidity and that certain minerality. Another one I always love talking about is an Albarino from Spain, which also has it's aromatic and fruity, dry, but it has this minerality that makes Albarino from Galicia in northwest Maine just a unique, pleasant summer wine.
And now a word from our sponsors. Exit 11 Coffee is there for your on-the-go lifestyle. With 8 convenient drive-through locations, they bring quality coffee to your car window. Need it sugar-free, dairy-free, or keto-friendly? At X11, you call the shots. They've got options for every diet and taste. The best part, every sip supports local farms and businesses. So swing by Exit 11 Coffee, where great taste meets small-town values without slowing you down. Hey, are you spinning your wheels trying to figure out what will really boost your business's bottom line? At Emberry Solutions, our Profit Priority Workshop is here to cut through the noise. We help you zero in on what truly matters, aligning your team, optimizing your processes, and magnifying your profits. Imagine your business running smoother than ever, with every decision and effort leading straight to increased profits. That's what focusing on the right priorities can do. Ready to boost your efficiency and profits? Visit Emberry Solutions and let's start making your business work smarter. At Emberry Solutions, we take your business from bottlenecks to breakthroughs. So as we move into, I want to start to move into our Harvest to Pour journey. I'm going to shift it into having you tell us about Hoffman Wineries, the current people you are currently the general manager with, and just kind of pick your brain on their history a little bit. And the Harvest to Pour journey is where they're sourcing their wines. Obviously, the Augusta region is very important to them now, in the wines, and how these wineries are making their wines uniquely theirs. You've touched on that a little bit, and then the marketing piece and the distribution piece, the pour, how they get they get this to customers, how they get customers coming back and wanting more, which is that general challenge we've been kind of bubbling up around this Midwest region of wines. So let's go back to tell us a little bit about Hoffman Wines initially.
So David and Jerry Hoffman, they're from Washington, Missouri, and he's been a very, very successful international businessman. And they're home for the summertime. They winter in Naples, Florida, summer in the area. And in a visit to Augusta, they were just basically reveling in how beautiful and timeless this area is. And when the COVID came, all wineries everywhere struggled. And there was an opportunity for these families that own the wineries to retire. And so the Hoffmans said, oh my God, this is the great opportunity for us to fulfill the vision that we had for what this area could be if it was marketed and promoted properly. Something as historical as Mount Pleasant going back to the 1850s and 60s with the barrel room caves built into the hillside. The campus is timeless. It's been around for years. The Balducci was started by a wine importer, Lou Balducci, who's really well known in the area. And he and his son, a restaurateur, Rick, decided to buy the land and plant grapes and form Balducci. And they kind of went the route with, well, we're not going to try to explain all the grape varieties. We will use proprietary names like Sonata, Natalia, and they use all these different names of Dolce that were Italian words. And so they use the proprietary route for these wines rather than having to get into discussing varietal types. And then Tony Camugian, who owned Augusta and Montel, again, they all retired and the Hoffmans then, purchased all of these and then set off and to build the story of what the history of these wineries are all about. The winemaker, Colin Pennington, he's the executive winemaker. Paul Hoban is our viticulturalist, are really, really talented men in their respective categories in terms of understanding and working with. And the beautiful thing, even as we have a couple of different winemakers, but the executive winemaker kind of sets the precedence. Even though much of the wine that's produced is Augusta AVA, there are certain wines to appeal to a different audience where they are buying grapes from around the state to create everyday table wines for different audiences. But the premium wines are all Augusta, from the Augusta AVA district and vineyards that they own. And we're also working closely with the University of Missouri in the Department of Agriculture at the university. They have an enologist and an oenological department, which is the winemaking department, and the viticultural department. And these PhDs that are running these departments I've met with and are doing incredible work, not only in research, but also supporting the Missouri state industry. So it's a whole joint effort. There's 127 wineries in the state. We have a 42% excise tax on all wines that come into the state, and 6 cents of that goes to promoting Missouri wines, which accounts for almost $2 million of support for the Missouri wine industry and the people who run that department of the state's Department of Agriculture do an incredible job trying to tell our story. But the wineries, the big thing is the food service, the restaurants at Balducci's or Montel and what we're bringing back to Mount Pleasant, and get people out there, music on Saturdays and Sundays to make drinking Missouri wines not only a flavor, excitement, but also an experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been out there a few times. The experience is fun. So now that you have, Hoffman has these different wineries and you described their uniquenesses, is the goal to maintain that uniqueness throughout, or Is it more to coalesce around Augusta wine region, make them more, I guess, not normalized. What is the term I'm looking for? Standardize some of the winemaking.
The objective is to keep each winery unique. Mm-hmm. Yet, let's use Napa or Sonoma as an example, and even within, let's say Alexander Valley within Sonoma County is its certain terroir, different from the Russian River Valley. There is, and each winemaker and each property, they don't sell all the same wines, and the wines that are, let's say, of the same varietal, the vinification of these wines each has a different personality. Let's say one with a little bit higher level of residual sugar, one a little lower. One has a little longer oak aging, the other one not as much. Okay. So to create a profile that meets the consumer's different tastes.
As the general manager, where does the challenge lie in that with managing each individual winery and its uniquenesses?
That's it's kind of a twofold story. One is working with the wholesalers, getting product into the marketplace, be it on the shelves of Schnucks and Dierbergs or, by the glass programs of nicer restaurants doing the wine dinners. On the other side is giving people a weekend adventure to go stay out in wine country and without having to leave Missouri. So the properties are uniquely different from one another. You've got the timelessness of Mount Pleasant. The Augusta is a real cozy venue with a beautiful production area behind it. And then the mountaintop at Montel, and then the pastoral feeling within the vineyards at Balducci. So they all have different personalities, as do their wines.
Okay. Excellent. So as far as you got into some distribution and got into introducing the wines and also creating this environment to come out to the wineries and create that experience so people identify the experience with the wine that they're having. So when they come back to a grocery store, Schnucks or Dierbergs, they match that experience with the wine they're buying from the grocery store. Is there any other ways, and we're getting into the pour, which is the marketing and the distribution, what are some of the challenges that you see Augusta wines having to overcome beyond the ones we talked about, name recognition, for both marketing and distribution?
Well, expanding the wineries are enjoying an exciting regrowth right now. The distribution sales are expanding quite rapidly within the state. The bigger challenges are going outside of your state. And that's not, it's true for what we're doing in Augusta, as true as it is for wineries in Wisconsin. You've got your statewide community supporting what you're doing, moving your product into another market because of the proximity to Illinois. Southern Illinois is an excellent market for our wines. And it's about educating the distributor salesmen and the retailers. So when people come in and looking for something different, they think of this timeless area of Augusta.
Okay. And where do you see the future of Augusta wines? Where do you see them going next?
Well, initially the expansion will be in all the neighboring states, Kansas, Arkansas, Iowa, and, Illinois, where we're already doing some things. But beyond that, it's kind of connected to the Hoffman family of businesses, with ferry boats going to Mackinac Island that are owned by the Hoffmans and having the wines available on those boats. So people are getting introduced to it up in northern Michigan, which is a state that produces similar grape variety. So the community there said, "Oh, here's what history to this place?" And they make a Sauvignon Blanc also, or Vidal Blanc. So let's try this one. So using the Hoffman family of businesses to introduce us into different markets.
That's great. I never thought of that, using the boating up and down from Michigan. That's great. And they have similar grapes. Do they have still similar terroir as well? As that was going to make that different region to region, to make that all that interest?
Yeah, that's interesting because each region has its certain challenges. And even within the world of the French American hybrids, some varietals do well in certain areas and they don't do as well in other areas. That's what makes the Norton as the American heritage grape and Missouri's official wine grape. It doesn't do well in a lot of other areas in the upper Midwest, which it gives us kind of an advantage on that particular varietal. And it's not hard to pronounce.
No. So through your career, if somebody wanted to work in this wine industry, specifically, Midwest wine industry, and they're new to it and they want to get involved, what would be your advice for somebody who wants to either, maybe start a winery or work within the wine industry here in the Midwest?
Well, it kind of depends on your background and what you want to do. You've got two aspects of the foundation of the wine industry. And one is agricultural, the viticultural side of the growing of the grapes. And the other side is the scientific side of enology, of being a chemist working in a lab. And both those areas draw different people to them. And, Paul Hoffman, put Paul Hoffman inside a wine cellar for a full day, he'll drown himself in a tank. And then on the other hand, people get into the vineyards and they go, my God, this is work to one person. And the other person says, God, doesn't this feel wonderful having your hands in the soil and watch nature reproduce itself year after year after year? It's, with the life cycle of a grapevine and how, you plant it and you really don't have a commercial product for 4 or 5 years. And then when it's like 10 to 15 years old, it's just really coming into its own in terms of the quality of fruit that it produces. So it's those aspects of it. But then again, on the other side, people come in through the industry via the restaurant business and they learn about wines, and it's connection with food. And that's absolutely symbiotic, food and wine, and then the culture and the history of the wines and foods of the different regions of the world, and evolving into maybe working for a wholesaler, going around and telling the story of a booklet filled with wines from all over the world and learning about all these different areas from a wine standpoint, a geography standpoint, a historical standpoint, and even an anthropological standpoint, that these areas have, the wine regions of the world have such a story to tell.
And off of that, you have now this growing popularity in all the wine regions. Again, like I said, the awakening of the Midwest wines and Colorado wines and Michigan, all coming kind of up to meet the West wines. Where do you see the industry going from here?
I've been doing this for so many years, and I watched this evolution of discovery by the consumer, and it's kind of like watching technology. You have your friends that have the latest in phones, the latest in gadgets, and the wine industry in a different way. When I first started selling wines of Italy, they were Italian wines by most consumers as opposed to Italian. and then all of a sudden, something like a Pinot Grigio comes into play, or an Asti Spumante, the beautiful Moscato grape making this sparkling sweet wine, Lambruscos. And then all of a sudden, Italian wines, people start looking into, the Chianti wicker basket was basically, Vino Ordinario. It's just a simple table wine. But then they learn that Chianti Classico and the Chianti Reserve wines are really, really special wines. And in recent years, the wines of Spain, not just Rioja, but the other areas of Spain have now becoming a discovered area, with Cava as a sparkling wine, better price than what you would pay for champagne, but something of really beautiful integrity. So that evolution, the wines of South America, the Malbecs of Argentina. So we're going to get our turn.
Okay. That's awesome. Growing up. So you see us as a very much a growing industry. Yes. Okay. All right. So a couple more questions. This one's kind of fun. You've talked about so many different wines and so many different varieties. What is your favorite beverage in the wine industry?
St. Louis, and if I didn't say it takes a whole lot of beer to make good wine. People always ask me, well, what's your favorite wine? And that's such a subjective question. But for me, I love all styles of wine, but I love them for what they are. And that's that kind of immersion. Whether you're dining at a French restaurant or an Italian restaurant, you drink wines of those regions. But then there's the wines where you had a special experience that made that wine special. Be it someone served an old vintage and one of these wines is a Saint Julien wine called Chateau Talbot. And he opened up a 1945 vintage of it. And this wine, and because it was so old, they poured the wine and all the fancy decanting of it. But what I learned with that experience of wines of that age, they're kind of like an Indiana Jones movie where they open the sarcophagus and there's the mummy and they go, oh my God, would you look at it? And all of a sudden the mummy turns to dust. Well, wines like old wines like that, you open them up, they're really aromatic, they're beautiful, they're soft and round and just absolutely luscious. And the guy looks at me, he says, he's kind of rolling his fingers and says, yeah, you're going to have to drink up here because that's going to spoil it in about 20 minutes. Wow. And the wine gets oxidized within about 20 minutes or so.
Oh my goodness.
And so Talbot, because of that education and that special, here we are, grapes growing during the war and you talk about putting time in a bottle, wine is the greatest story of putting time in a bottle.
That is great. I love that. Wine is the greatest story of putting time in a bottle. It's the stories you can tell around the beverage that makes it your favorite beverage. That is great. Awesome. So speaking of Hoffman Wines and the area and the experience you can have out there, are there any upcoming events or any kind of promotions or anything you'd like to talk about the winery out here in Augusta?
Well, the biggest things that this is the first of a series of wine dinners at Yaya's August 1st, being able to pair these wines with a really creative, outstanding cuisine. The weekends and the food at these wineries is in itself, in the fall is the perfect time to be in wine country, so to come to Augusta in September and October, when the weather is cool, October, the trees are changing. At Mount Pleasant, they had discontinued serving food and having music, and that we're bringing back in the next month or so. But then all four wineries are going to have music on the weekends. And we're looking at doing, if you like jazz, come to Mount Pleasant. If you like blues, come to this winery. If you like pop, contemporary, go to this place. And so we're starting to do a kind of a music theme with each of the restaurant or each of the wineries and with the restaurants. So that's one of the concepts is kind of creating a musical genre related to each of the wineries. So enjoy that in the fall when the weather's just right and you're in the hills. And it reminds me a little bit of Germany because of the terrain within a wine country, because Germany's steep hillsides just reminds me a lot of it. And the Missouri River, but the road to Augusta is the Lewis and Clark Trail.
Yeah.
Which
it's nice and winding.
The story in itself.
Yes, yes. It is a winding. The drive itself is fun. I have to agree. The drive itself is beautiful. In the fall, it's really something to see. Tom, this has been a really cool history lesson in wines, this Midwest region, how it saved French wines all the way to what we have today, and its dormancy and its regrowth, and what's happening out in the Augusta wine region as well. This has been very educational, very entertaining, and I really hope people will hear this and come check out the wineries in Missouri as well, and learn from this. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was talking to you about this kind of got my heart pumping, and I really appreciate the invitation to tell this story. Thanks.
All right, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.